One quick note now about how this is set up. This particular one is set up. This is a little different. I'm going to spend the first half of the time we have today sharing my material. During that time, I am not going to be stopping for questions, but you guys are going to have questions as I'm talking. So please, in fact, actually somebody's already doing this. As you think of questions, please put them in the chat box, because then what's going to happen is roughly halfway through the session today, I'm going to stop yakking so much, and then it's just going to be a big old free-for-all. No, I'm kidding. We're going to open it up for questions, and the rest of the time, Marnie and I are going to be fielding questions that you have, okay? So let me jump through it, because I want to make sure that we get through the stuff and get onto the stuff that you guys feel that is most important to you, okay? All right. So here's the learning goals. This is my job. This is what I really want to be able to accomplish before we leave today. I want everyone to be able to leave today being able to create a basic T-table that matches your skills with the needed skills listed in the job description. Now, I know some of you know about this, and please, I can just see some of you rolling your eyes right now. No, I'm kidding. There is a reason why we harp on this so much, and if I do my job right today, you're going to understand why we put so much emphasis on this, because this is really an expectation of today's hiring managers. The other thing is to be able to name 3 advantages of networking. Now, I know networking for a lot of folks is a drag. It's even a drag for me, and I've been making a living talking for a long, long time. I would argue that today's culture makes networking easier than it's ever been, and I hope to be able to share that with you. Now, the next 2 bullet points kind of go hand in hand. Being able to understand when and why it's important to take off experience and qualifications that go beyond the company's needs, because this allows you to avoid the common pitfalls of being seen as overqualified. And we've actually been able to prove that this works. So I want to make sure that you guys understand that. And finally, successfully keep the momentum of the job search going for as long as it takes, which can be a challenge at this point as well. But let's start out with a little bit of good news, because I know there's so much bad news going around. So we are going to actually start with some good news that has come through in recent months. But before we do that, I want to hear from you guys, and I'm so glad that so many of you have been jumping onto chat. You guys are obviously veterans at this. Big difference from where everybody was a year ago when we were doing this. What I want you to do is, in the chat box right now, is I want you to describe job searching over the age of 40 or 50, pick your number. If you could describe the process of job searching at this point in your life in one word, what would that one word be? And of course, don't use any words you wouldn't use in a professional interview. Okay, challenging, frustrating, great, hard, stress, tough, challenging, lots of challenging, interesting, frustrating, defeated, oh, silence, difficult, tiring, difficult, hard. Yeah. So when I first created the idea of doing this little exercise, I assumed that most of the responses, if not all the responses, were going to be kind of in the scary, challenging, whatever area. I do like the fact that there are people saying so many choices, opportunities, interesting. There is no wrong answer to this. What you feel is what you feel. What I hope to be able to do today is I hope that you will leave today feeling a bit more empowered, so that if your one word was kind of on the negative end of the spectrum, I'm not kidding myself. It's not you're going to go bouncing out of here going, oh, everything is wonderful. But I hope that you will be able to feel that you have a little bit more agency than you have before. So feel free to continue putting those words in if you wish, but I want to get on to the good news, because it has it exists, okay? So a recent article in the Harvard Business Review gave us some hopeful news that employers are looking to experienced workers to help them through the current crisis. And the crisis continues. There's still confusion. There's still a lot of people not quite sure what's happening, and you hear things about variants and opening and shutting and everything else. They're looking for people where, this is not their first rodeo, okay? They are creating return to work programs. Some of these are called returnships. So they're basically handled like internships, but they're for experienced workers that have a set of skills. They're focusing simply on the skills that need to be updated, or they're simply directly hiring. But the point is that they're beginning to realize that experienced workers have the edge over their younger counterparts to bring to the table things like institutional knowledge and education, work experience, mature perspective, stable life stage, dedication, loyalty, and energy and enthusiasm for returning to work. By the way, before I forget, because I already have once, so I'm going to grab it now while it's in the brain. If you folks learn better by simply kicking back and listening and taking it in, don't worry about taking notes. I am going to send you the slide deck from this presentation. Marnie and I have collected very, very helpful information that I'm going to be sending to you in a package tomorrow via email. So the short story is sit back, relax, don't worry about taking notes because you're going to get all of this good stuff. Okay, so getting back to this good news, I've talked with a lot of experienced workers that tend to forget to promote their soft skills in an interview and even on their resume. They're so focused on the hard skills. They're so focused on the technology and all of that kind of stuff. They forget to promote things like adaptability, emotional intelligence, mentoring, cool-headedness. And I think the reason they do that is because we tend to forget that those are skills. I know I do. I'm Generation X, and there's things that I do just naturally that I'm finding out from younger people. Oh my God, how do you do that? That's amazing. And I'm like, I don't, you just do it. It's common sense. So I am here to tell you that it happens. I was hired by a millennial-led tech company not terribly long ago, and I was in my 50s when it happened. And the reason being was that I had soft skills that the younger people around me didn't have. So we're going to be talking about that. But as I said, we're just going to start out with you with a little bit of happy news so it all isn't gloom and doom. All right, now, the most important thing for you guys is to talk about what has changed. So if you have been out of the workforce for a significant amount of time, or you've been working in sustained employment for many years, you may find that resume writing, interviewing, and the job search itself has changed. What used to work may or may not work now, and I've seen that happen. Those of you who work in employment, in fields where employment changes, often might be aware of some of these changes, but I would say that COVID kind of basically threw everything into chaos. So there's going to be stuff here for you as well. So what we're going to be doing here is we're going to be talking again about the absolute vital need to match your skills to the skills listed on the job description. We're going to be talking about the vital importance of networking, as I said before, which I would argue is easier to do now that so much communication is being done remotely. We're going to be talking about teleconferencing, which is going to pop up either completely or it's either going to be the dominant communication form. And finally, what has changed since the last time, especially if it's been a while, you yourself. Oftentimes, we don't give a lot of thought to how we ourselves have changed since the last time we interviewed for a job and how those changes affect how we self-market. And that can be good or bad. It's interesting to think about. Okay, so matching your skills to the skills listed. Now, historically, resumes were generally written chronologically. And even, I would argue, some of the interviews themselves were conducted that way. So you know what I'm talking about. You listed the duties of your most recent job at the top, and you worked your way down from there. And in this model, the responsibility was on the hiring manager to make a connection between what you'd done before to what he or she wanted you to do now. Now, all accomplishments were pretty much considered important, even if they weren't directly relevant to the job posting. By the way, sidebar before I go any further, chronological resumes are still being used in certain instances today, so they've not gone away. What I would suggest is after we talk a little bit about skills-based resumes and chronological, if you're not sure which type to use, reach out to CareerForce, and we will be happy to sit down with you and talk about your goals and your accomplishments and then determine from there which format is going to be best for you. Now, here's the reason for the change. These days, employers want to see directly and quickly the actual experience and accomplishments you have that directly relate to what they say they need on the job description. That is going to be the story that you need to tell as quickly and efficiently as you can as to why you are right for the company's needs. So one way you can do this is by using what is called a T-chart or a T-table. Now, keep in mind, this is an exercise that you do not give to a hiring manager. You would not email them this or hand them this. This is simply something that you do in private on your own as you're preparing. The first thing you do, you got the job description in front of you. And what I tend to do is really do it old school. I literally have printed it out and actually highlighted the things that they say they need. Then you draw a big old T on a piece of paper. On the left-hand column, you are going to be writing the keywords and phrases of what they say they need. Okay, we need somebody with experience recruiting team members. We need somebody with experience as a human resources business partner. And we need somebody to work with various departments. In the right-hand column, you are going to write out your accomplishments and your experiences that match the keywords or phrase. Okay, you need somebody who's got experience recruiting team members. Great, I exceeded all recruitment goals by attending job fairs and sourcing new applicants. You need somebody to work with various departments. I collaborated with hiring managers in order to develop candidate profiles and to attract top talent. Okay, so basically what this gets down to is you need this, great, I've got it, here's how. You need this, great, I've got it, here's how. You need this, great, I've got it, here's how. By doing this exercise right away, first of all, you can see, all right, do I even want to go for this job? Because if there's not a lot of matches, and you know, you've heard this before, you don't have to match everything. But go through and take a look and see if there's enough of a match where you feel confident going in and talking to them about how you're the best candidate for the position. If you don't see a lot of matches, you might want to you might want to wait a little bit. Maybe you want to get more training or more preparation for that particular job. But if you do see a good match, then you're going to know what you want to emphasize on the resume and what you're going to prepare, what you're going to be talking about in the interview. Okay? All right. Now, sometimes I feel like I'm going at breakneck speed here, but I want to make sure that we throw it open for a lot of questions here at the end. So I'm actually going to move on to networking. Statistics are consistent on this. 75 to 80% of jobs come from knowing somebody who knows somebody. A sobering reality is that there are many jobs available which will not appear on job boards. Those jobs advertised are word of mouth, associations, company-related websites. So this is another reason why networking is so important, to find out about the jobs that you're not going to find out about with the job boards. Networking and informational interviews can be really, really helpful for experienced workers. So I don't have the time to go through this, but I'm a huge fan of the informational interview. If you want to know more about informational interviews, reach out to me. I will be happy to tell you about this. Okay, so let's say networking and informational interviews can be really helpful, especially for somebody who's not been on the job hunting trail. For example, let's say that you now want to make a career change and get into something you've never done before, or maybe you want to do what I did and go back into something that you haven't done for years. So the big question for people who are in this situation is, do you have the skills that will make you competitive? And I use that word deliberately because one of the things that I really, really, really emphasize is, even though it's not real fun to think about, I do encourage that people think about your competition. Don't make that this murky person off in the back that you don't spend a lot of time thinking about. Why? Because you're going up against these people. And you need to be able to think about, okay, what kind of skills and what kind of accomplishments are they bringing to the table? And what do I need to be able to say to make the hiring manager go, oh no, but I want you. The best people to give you the answer of whether or not you have what it takes to be competitive are people who are actually doing the job that you seek. Find those folks. Ask them to review your resume. Give candid feedback as to whether they think you're out of the box ready or whether you might want to need a little bit of refreshers. And by the way, the Dislocated Worker Service Program is really interested in people to apply right now. So if you need some short-term training that you feel would brush up your skills and put you over the top, please, please, please consider Dislocated Worker Service Program. Um, Networking and info. I'm sorry, you guys. I'm looking at notes here, and it's tiny, tiny font. And guess what? We're doing a webinar about experienced workers. My eyesight is awful. Networking and informational interviews can also assess whether or not you even want that career change. I find that's very handy. You may talk to some people in a newer field. You may discover that this kind of new direction isn't exactly what you want. That's fine. Back out of that road, go down another one. Talking to people who are doing the work that you want to do can, by the way, also give you insider tips as to where the jobs are and specifically what the employers are going to want to hear. You may hear things like, well, we don't really have anything in the department right now, but I can tell you right now that in 3 months from now, they're bringing in a position. So you can find out, okay, what kind of certificates are going to impress them, what kind of language they're going to want to hear. That's what my mentor did for me when I got back into training. She said, Robin, stop calling yourself a teacher. If you wanted to teach adults, you are a trainer. You are an instructor. You are not a teacher. Okay, take advantage of networking that you can find out about jobs that no one else has posted. Okay, so again, by talking with somebody who can look down the road a little bit and say, yes, I can tell you right now that in the fall they are thinking about bringing in this position, you will be able to find out about it before anybody else does. And finally, more experienced workers are choosing to focus on specific companies or organizations rather than wait for jobs to be posted. Seriously, think about a company that really interests you. Research it thoroughly. Review your qualifications, especially the skills that you have that are going to be valuable in this current time of difficulty. Then reach out and meet them. It can be as simple as a quick phone call or an email. Let them know that you are simply opening the door to possible relationships. You're not expecting them to create a brand new position for you. Honestly, just think about creating a really, really good relationship with them. I created relationships with people 10 years ago during the recession. I got one guy that was running his own company. He now works for Amazon. So you never know where these people are going to go. You never know where the opportunities are going to go. All right, speeding along here to the next thing that has changed, teleconferencing. So the good news is you're doing it right now. So right now, I mean, I wrote this curriculum originally when people were brand new to teleconferencing. I'm guessing that most of you have done enough of it, either formally like this for vocational development, or maybe you have interviewed already. Some of you have Zoomed. I always laugh. My mother is in her late 80s and she has been Zooming, so you can do it. So anyway, I would say just again, just the most that you can do, just continue to practice it. Don't worry about not knowing the specific platform they're going to use. Remember, they're going to keep it simple for you. It is not advantageous for them at all to have a complicated teleconferencing system where a lot of candidates get confused. They're going to make it as easy for you as they can. Okay, set up your background. So this is an interesting bit of actual statistics. They did a poll of hiring managers and they asked how people felt about those fake backgrounds that you can create. And you guys know what I'm talking about. You can blur the background. You can be sitting in front of the Golden Gate Bridge. You can be sitting in front of a cartoon castle. Absolutely overwhelmingly, the hiring managers did not like fake backgrounds. They want something real. They want to feel like they're engaging with you. What I would suggest is keep the background simple. Don't be putting any kind of artwork that's kind of difficult to interpret. I don't know, is that a sailboat? What is that? Basically, I always say don't put things in the background that's going to be competing with their attention to you, okay? Things like lighting. is also very important because they are going to want to see your face. They are going to want to see the expression. Okay. Now I have a little selfie light. You can get those fairly cheaply. You don't have to buy one, but you may. I find that it helps a little bit. Be careful about lighting on the side like I have here. I have kind of an ill-placed window here. I need to keep those shutters closed. You don't want to sit directly in front of a window because then you're going to be in silhouette. So just make sure that the lighting is warm, they can see you, and that it looks good. All right, guess I did that. Okay, dress as you would face to face. Now, here's the thing. I suggest that you wear the entire interview outfit, even down to the shoes. Why? Psychological. You actually do feel differently if you are wearing the entire thing that you would be wearing in a face-to-face interview than if you're simply doing from the waist up. Okay? Here's another thing, make good eye contact. Now, this was something that I actually learned from myself. We are so used to looking at a screen that that's what we tend to do with teleconferencing. And the problem with that is that you're not making eye contact. Making eye contact via teleconference is every single bit as important as making eye contact in real life. I experienced this when I was in a staff meeting months ago, and a coworker was staring down at the screen the entire time we had our meeting until the very end. For whatever reason, he chose to look up and look into the lens. And it was visceral. Oh my goodness. It was like, oh my God, wow. The difference was incredible. So you want to make sure. And the cool thing about teleconferencing is that you can put little post-it notes to remind yourself. You can put them here, you can put them here. They can't see that you're actually putting a post-it note to remind yourself to smile, remind yourself to look into the lens. Very, very handy, but make sure eye contact is all important. Now, make sure your audio is good. Now, I wish that there was an across-the-board suggestion on here that I could give you. I can't. We discovered here at Deed, just by fumbling and starting and trying, that what worked really well for one person didn't work for another person. For me, headsets have always worked. Other times people have unplugged their headset and just use the microphone in their laptop. What I would suggest is that you practice Zoom with a family member, try a couple of different ways. You don't have to spend money on expensive equipment. You know, if somebody is a podcaster in your family and you want to borrow their mic, okay, that's fine. But you don't have to go out and buy stuff to do this well. Okay, if you take nothing else away from this session, from this section rather, sorry, please take this one. If you forget everything else, fine. Have a backup phone number handy to the person you're speaking with. You never know. We have had glitches before. Poor Marnie has had to take over for me because my Wi-Fi gave up here. You never know what's going to happen. So always have a backup phone number handy. Don't go into an interview without knowing exactly how to get a hold of that person very quickly. Okay? The last thing we're going to talk about in terms of changes. You. So take some time to think about the following. How do you feel about looking for employment now? And do those feelings show? Now, of course, if you're really enthusiastic about the idea, that's fantastic to let it show. But if your feelings are negative, if you still have some emotional leftovers from your last employment or resentment about having to look now, this could be a problem. I would suggest that you reach out to somebody in your life that you trust to be straightforward with you. Ask them if they pick up on any bitterness or resentment or just plain struggle to move on when you're talking about your last position. If they do, feel welcome to reach out to us. We can help you find ways of talking about your current job search in the most positive and effective way. Okay? So I really do suggest that. Another one, I know Marnie is a big believer in this, write your answers down. Actually go through and pick out some questions like, why did you leave your last position? And actually write it down so that you can go back and read it and see what you think about it. Okay, evaluate your skills now. Here's the other thing. You have gained skills. both on the job and just living your life. And these are valuable skills. And this is kind of getting back to what I was talking about with soft skills before. You've got a lot of skills just because you've been to several rodeos at this point that you didn't have when you were 23. Make sure that you were spending some time accumulating those, writing down notes about that are going to put you head and shoulders over the younger person who just hasn't been around long enough to be able to accumulate those skills. And tied into that, what makes you a better candidate today than you were the last time? What have you learned and gotten better at that younger employees have let to learn? I'll tell you right now, I basically got my last job uh, before this at the tech company because I have learned to adapt. I've learned to not, fly off the handle and just have a meltdown every time something doesn't go quite the way I want it to. Why? Because I've just been around and I've just had it happen too much. I'm much, much better at just taking a deep breath and going the new direction and not making a big deal out of it. Well, as it turned out, I was working with a lot of younger people, and by the way, these were super smart people. They just hadn't lived long enough to be able to develop those skills. And so this boss was spending an enormous amount of time figuratively talking people down from the ledge every time a client changed their mind and wanted them to do something different. So that these soft skills of mine were going to be really, really attractive. Now, here's another one. What are your goals? Now, this is a big one that people frequently say. How do I answer the question about where do you want to be in 5 years' time? Now, it's really, really, really important that you have a specific answer for this question. Your goal may be to retire in 3 years, but honestly, I would advise you to work with us and figure out a way to answer that question carefully so that it's honest, but at the same time, it's not taking you out of contention. Remember, when they're asking you, what do you want to accomplish in the last 3 years or the next 3 years, they're willing to put a certain amount of financial investment into the person they bring in. Think about it. Do they really want somebody who kind of laughs and says, well, I hope to be fishing? Is that going to be, is that going to be a good thing for them? So what I would suggest is if you're not 100% sure how to answer that question, reach out to us and we will help you. Okay, real quick, I want to talk about mistakes commonly made. Now, by the way, we get these from employers themselves. So the employers themselves have given candidates feedback, experienced candidates, and they say these are the stumbling blocks that frequently happen with an experienced worker looking for a job. Number one, you guys could have said this, you guys could have told me this, being seen as overqualified. Number two, losing momentum, getting all excited about the process and then just kind of fizzles out. Number three, letting your narrative be negative. And sometimes your narrative can be negative and you don't even realize how you're coming across. And finally, not updating your skills. All of these are important. All of these we need to talk about. Okay, so the most common reason candidates are perceived to be overqualified is they've listed too many accomplishments on their resume, or they've listed accomplishments and skills that are unrelated to the job that is open. Let me give you an example. A former restaurant manager who genuinely wants to obtain a position as a cook might be sending the wrong message if she sends out a resume that includes accomplishments like reducing operating costs. Now, that's a fantastic accomplishment that she's probably really proud of, but the hiring manager might wonder if she might be tempted to offer advice to the boss as to how the kitchen is run. A better bet would be for her to focus on the skills that are listed on the job description and not to add other accomplishments achieved at a higher level. Now remember, the resume is for them. It is your marketing document. I understand that you want to put, achievements that you're proud of on a resume, but remember, that's more for you. It's not for them. And the important thing about the resume is it is for them. Now, by the way, a skills-based resume is probably going to be better for experienced workers at this point in their life. And we do an entire webinar about different kinds of resumes and when to use this and when to use that. And I would definitely reach out to us and find out which type of resume is best for you and how these accomplishments are being perceived. Now, we're still talking about being seen as overqualified. Now, let's talk about how you can come across as overqualified in the interview itself. Now, it's really, really important to remember that millennials and Generation Z are going to be the people who are going to be interviewing you. Now, these two particular generations are highly collaborative and they're team-oriented. Somebody explained to me that my generation, which is Generation X, tends to be the lone wolf. We tend to be more or less the people who just say, tell me what you want me to do, and I'm going to go off and do it. But you are going to be talking to people who are going to be highly, highly team-oriented and collaborative. Think about it. If you've been the boss for many years, it can be really, really easy to slip into boss mode and speak like you did when you were in charge. That can come across as a little threatening or off-putting. Now, you might be like me. You may naturally speak with confidence, but you know what? The problem is sometimes confidence can be misunderstood as being someone who doesn't want to listen to teammates or consider their point of view. So it can be a really tricky line to walk. So again, mock interviewing is a great way of giving yourself a chance to practice listening techniques, looking for opportunities of communicating that you're looking forward to a chance to fit in with their established team. Okay? Now, another mistake made is losing momentum. One of the biggest challenges people report about looking for work as an experienced worker is just running out of steam. Many seekers share that they start out with loads of enthusiasm and motivation and organization and goals, only to find out that family commitments pop up, frustrations gets the better of them, or they just plain lose their drive. Now, if you're determined to obtain employment, make goals for yourself now, but also seek out a support network that will help you stick to your plan. I always recommend thinking of it as a marathon rather than a sprint, okay? Just like a marathon runner needs hydration and fuel all the way through the race, you will too. Now, you may snag a position very shortly after starting your search. That's great, but don't beat yourself up if you don't. These are challenging days. It definitely calls for endurance, okay? Now, another common mistake, and this pretty much happens unintentionally, is coming across negative. Now, as I mentioned earlier, if you have some residual bitterness regarding a former employer, I would say seek assistance in finding truthful, neutral language to use when talking about them. So if a new employer gets the impression that they're interviewing a really judgmental person who's sitting there with a lot of emotional baggage, it's going to be natural for them to choose another candidate who's excited and positive and enthusiastic about the new opportunity. Now, and I know you guys are way ahead of me on this. This is not to say create fake excitement. They're going to spot that immediately. But what I would say is leave the baggage at the door, bring in your skills and your accomplishments instead. Now, be careful about word choice. The words fired and laid off are not interchangeable. Laid off means you lost your job because your organization closed or restructured, downsized, moved. There was no longer need for your particular position. By the way, a lot of people are being laid off due to COVID, and it's still happening. Don't be ashamed of that. I have a lot of people who seem to be very concerned about, oh, I lost my job because of COVID. How is that going to be perceived negatively? No, everybody's dealing with it. There's absolutely nothing to be ashamed of there. The word fired is very negative. What I would suggest is choose a more neutral term. Involuntary separation is the official word. I would encourage you to overcome the natural hesitation to talk about this and seriously reach out to our team. The problem with if there are going to be times when maybe it was kind of your bad, and you're going to need to, first of all, don't represent yourself as laid off because they can do a background check and find that pretty quickly. But honestly, and I've gotten this from a friend of mine who's in HR. She said, honestly, being fired happens far more often than you would think. And there's lots of ways that you can address it truthfully, but positively. Okay, so reach out to us on that. Okay, not updating your skills. So here's a big thing, especially if you guys have been employed for a long, long time in one job. So if you've been employed with the same organization for 30 years, you have a solid set of skills that that particular organization needed you to have. However, when you go out exploring other organizations, you may find that other skills might be needed. Sometimes it's not enough just to be willing to learn. Think about it. A hiring manager has two candidates. One candidate says, I may not have personal experience with this particular software, but hey, I'm willing to learn. But the other candidate says, yes, I've used this software for the past 3 years in my previous position, and here are my specific accomplishments with using it. The importance of that software may decide who gets the job. Now, you might be interested in going back to work that you did many years ago. Now, depending on the nature of the work, even a degree may not be entirely what you need to be qualified for a job. Now, I'm going to use myself as an example. I got a teaching degree. I got it back in the 80s. Now, there are going to be things that are just never going to change about teaching people in education, so I can lean on those. But the fact of the matter is, I think we can all agree that teaching has upheaved in the last 12 months, and obviously they are going to be interested in people who can make dynamic virtual content as well. So that is going to require me to update my skills. So we can help in certain areas. As I mentioned to you, the dislocated worker services can be great for short-term training. They can get you licenses. They can get you certifications. We did have a partnership with Coursera. There is not a current partnership that's going on at this point, but you never know in the future. So I would definitely suggest that you think about that as well. Okay. I have no idea what time it is. I went a little bit over. I apologize for that. But what I want to do now is open up the rest of the time we have to whatever questions you have. And as always, Marnie is doing a great job curating. Hit me.
All right. So a couple of housekeeping things right away. Some folks didn't realize that this was 6 parts. This was just one part of a 6-part series. So creative job search is divvied up into different chapters. We used to do them all in one day. Now we do them in an hour each. So watch them in any order you'd like. You can go back to that page and watch them in order if you want. Yes, this information will be sent to you, the speaker notes along with the slides. Someone said they'd like to set up a one-on-one appointment. Great. Go to that locations page, find your location, and email or call them and let them know that you'd like to do a one-on-one appointment. Here's a good one. Will Career Force resources be available for everyone after the PEUC program ends? Yes. And Job Service, Robin and Marnie, our agency, we work for anyone and everyone. We help with job search assistance to any age, any industry, any education. You don't have to be on unemployment. So if you know somebody who's struggling with job search, please refer them to us and pass along the information that you've found from us. All right, Miss Robin. Early on, somebody said, I just achieved the personal care assistant training off of the Minnesota Department of Human Services website. And I passed this test mostly to be the PCA for my parent, but I'm not sure if I should put that on my resume when I'm applying for office jobs. What do you think, Robin?
That's great. That's a great question. We haven't had a question like that pop up recently, and I think it's very relevant. So thank you. Generally speaking, and I think Marnie and I are really close on this, you want to make sure that you're putting things on your resume that are relevant to the job that you are going for. And if you take a look at that job and you say, you know, PCA is certainly an accomplishment, it's a credential, I would say, but doesn't really have anything to do with what I'm going to be doing for the job. You can either leave it out or you can put it down under kind of additional accreditation or things like that. I wouldn't emphasize it. I certainly wouldn't necessarily put it on the top because you're going to want to focus in on what they say they need and how you match that. And then it's up to you afterwards whether you want to put it on at the very end or not. I think that's fine to leave it on. I can't think of anything where it would be awful, but it's just they're going to look at it and go, yeah, that doesn't have anything to do with what we need.
All right, there's been some discussion about online learning, and I'm going to paste in some more ideas for you folks other than the ones that you've already shared with each other. And then the next question, Robin, there's a huge discussion about this and people keep popping in with it. How do they find work from home or remote work jobs?
This is a good, very timely question as well, and it's popping up a lot. What I would suggest is here's my opinion, and we've never really had this question before, so I'm going to be really interested to hear Marnie's take on this as well. Here's my feeling. Unless there is a physical need that you need to be at home, I would honestly put the emphasis more on the kind of work that you're doing rather than how you do it. I understand the attraction of working from home. I certainly, by the way, don't get me wrong. I certainly understand that people have concerns about their health and safety. And I think everybody is worried about health and safety at this point. But we're talking about work that in theory you're going to be doing after the pandemic has kind of gotten under control and things have gotten back to at least more like they used to be. I would say it makes more sense for you to use what am I going to be doing and let that be the focus. The other thing you want to make sure is I'm sure there's a lot of jobs that are popping up all over the place that are do it from home. Traditionally, those jobs haven't been great jobs. They haven't been necessarily the greatest employers. So you're going to want to do a lot of research on those employers, on what you're going to be asked to do, on whether it is a good place to work, on whether it's going to be enjoyable, on whether it's going to be fulfilling, on whether it's a good company. So what I would suggest is, I mean, you can go online, you can take a look. I would say networking is another thing, going on LinkedIn. But honestly, at the end of the day, I got to throw in, please make it more about what you're going to be doing and are you going to be happy in that job rather than simply it's a job that you can do from home.
Yes, absolutely. All of that. One of the folks that I follow on LinkedIn and on Instagram, that's one of the top things that she's constantly saying. She does skits about it, kind of making light. But if you were the employer and that was the first thing you heard, that that would not be attractive.
Yeah,
You
I
need
want
to
this because
talk
I can do
about
it
the
from home.
work.
Yeah.
Exactly, right. So it you need to really focus if it's something that you need to do, that you have to do because of health reasons or who you live with, um, then obviously you're going to have more of a focus strategy on remote or work from home opportunities. But once you get into talk with the employer, that needs to be in the background. And
Mhm.
you really need to focus on the work, just like Robin had said.
Absolutely.
Um,
And again, just remember, because I know that some people, safety, it's not that they're choosing working from home just because it's nice. They're concerned about safety. Absolutely. We're not de-emphasizing that. But again, the idea of, okay, what do I want to do? What is going to be meaningful? What is going to be a company that's going to support me? And then what do they have in place to keep me safe?
all right. So if you have a an underlying illness or condition, um, do you disclose that right away at an interview?
Nope. If you can do the job. And quite frankly, I mean, that's why any of us go for a job. We go for a job because we can do the job. The important thing is that you should be able to be, or you should be applying rather for jobs that you can do with or without reasonable accommodations. Okay? So answer that question yourself first. I can do this job and I don't even need any accommodations, or I could do this job with a reasonable accommodation. Then go for the job. Don't be bringing it up right away. What you want to do is you want to bring your case about why you are the perfect match for this job and why you're going to meet and exceed their expectations in the job. Later, after you've successfully done that, is when you can bring up, if you choose to, any kind of a disability or underlying condition that that you feel that they should be aware of.
All right, here's a subjective one for you here. Uh, as a person walks into an interview with a cane, do they see the person or the cane?
Wow, that is really subjective. This is interesting because when I did the interviewing workshop last week, we had something about hearing aids. So this is apparently on people's minds. Yeah, it really is because that means crawling into the mind of the person who is conducting the interview, and I can't do that, guys. I really can't. People who are conducting these interviews are human. We all kind of have our biases, and some people are able to overcome their biases and go beyond it. Some people are not. I would say that if you need the cane, for goodness sake, use it. You may run into people. The interviewing workshop that I did, my co-facilitator there is a veteran. And we were talking about hearing aids, and he said, I was in artillery. I don't have hearing in one ear. So this is going to be close to me. There are people who know that young people may have hearing aids, young people may have canes. It doesn't necessarily mean that you are older because you have a cane. What I would suggest is this: move forward. If you're right for the job, let the decision be, are you right for the job? Can you make that case in a compelling way? And then you just have to kind of go on a little on faith that the person is going to rise above it. Now, I'm going to add one other thing that popped up on another recent webinar. It was with yet another colleague who was talking about sitting in on an interview with somebody with a physical disability that was really obvious. There is no way they could have hid this if they wanted to. It was there. I don't even remember what it was, but it was there. And one of the first things they said when they sat down is, let's talk about the elephant in the room, shall we? They said it as a joke. They said it in a positive way. They explained it. They didn't get into the weeds, but they explained a little bit about this is why you're seeing this or hearing this or whatever it was. And then they moved on. So my feeling about it is, if the cane is really going to freak you out, but you know for a fact that the cane is not going to have anything to do on you, is not going to deter you to do the job at all. Think about maybe doing that. Sit down and say, let's just talk about this, shall we? And then go ahead, explain it, don't get into the weeds, and move on from there.
All right, another one kind of similar but different. And rewinding back to when we were talking about video conference, just like this. And as you're reading stuff on the screen, as you had mentioned, or if you're just really kind of overwhelmed and frustrated because the technology does not always work, so you're appearing just maybe not yourself. How do you address that when you're in one of these virtual interviews?
Honestly, and I've got a whole lifetime experience of being an actor, so I know all kinds of I've had a lot of experience of things happening that you don't want to happen and powering through. My feeling about it is there's absolutely nothing wrong. And this, by the way, also would be applicable for in-person interviews when all of a sudden you crash and burn, which sometimes happens. There's nothing wrong with taking a moment, taking a deep breath, and saying, okay, sorry about that, little discombobulated, let's move on. And then you need to power through. Things happen. Things happen. And I think honestly, the vast majority of hiring managers have been on that situation. They've gone through their own little meltdown situation. They're going to empathize with that. It's going to appear enormous to you, but honestly, it's not going to be as a big deal for them because they know that things like that aren't necessarily going to happen every day at work. So honestly, what I would suggest is, if you need to take a second, take a deep breath, power on. Okay? Soldier on. That's my little British quote for the day.
Soldier on. I like it. So we've got a lot of talk in here as well about, say I've got this 30-year career, I've hired, I've fired, I'm very used to a leadership position. but now I'm looking for something different. How do I present myself to these interviewers so that I'm not a threat or intimidating?
hmm kind of what I would say. First, start with what we talked about a little earlier a few minutes ago. So the first thing you want to do is on your resume, don't be emphasizing things that you did about managing people or leadership or how you saved the company X number of dollars or things like that. Focus a skills-based resume solely on the day-to-day chores that they're going to be asking of you. Number two, why do you want? I mean, there's if you don't want a leadership position, there's probably a good reason for it. Think about the advantages of jobs that are not manager or directors, because there are a lot of things that are really good about being somebody who is just doing a job each day. If your focus is entirely working with the customers, if your focus is entirely making food or whatever it is that you want to do, there's going to be advantages to having a job that's going to be, focused in that way. So write down all of the positives. And then the important thing that you want to be able to communicate to them is that you are taking this job deliberately because of a life choice. Not, you don't want to give them the impression that you're going for lower jobs just because you can't get anything else. You want them to feel that maybe it's their team that you're attracted to, maybe it's the work itself you're attracted to, maybe it's the clientele that you're attracted to, but you're choosing this job deliberately.
Okay, just kind of just a PSA for everybody here. When you are looking for remote work or work from home, if they ask for any money up front, do not engage. Do not engage with them. Move on. Look for more legitimate opportunities.
Yep.
No legitimate employer should be asking you for money on the front end.
Yep.
Um,
Oh, the other thing, I'm going to tag on to that, by the way. We haven't talked about Glassdoor.com in this particular one today. Glassdoor.com, LinkedIn, a lot of these sites is a great way to go to research the company. They're basically opportunities for current or former employees to ask about what it was like working at that company. And believe it or not, if you're not familiar with it, I've been very impressed with Glassdoor. It's kind of moved away from the parking lot for bitter former employees that are complaining and actually move to being a legitimate, helpful site that will talk about benefits, talk about work culture, talk about advantages and disadvantages, pros and cons. So you should be doing thorough research on every company that you are thinking about engaging with. And you can find very, very quickly online whether a company is sketchy or whether it's legitimate.
all right, here's a popular one about negotiating pay. Um, if you've got some very worthy soft skills, but you don't have recent technical experience, how do you negotiate for what you deserve?
Okay, so the first thing you want to do is you want to do a lot of research before you even go into that interview. We will send you some URLs of sites where you can go on. ONET Online springs to mind. Even our own website, salary.com. There are a lot of websites out there that will give you average salaries according to which state you live in and what the job is. So generally speaking, you should go into an interview knowing the range of salary a person can reasonably expect. From there, what I would suggest is make a case for the salary that you want to ask for. And you're going to obviously want to base it on what you can do versus what you can't do. Okay, if that makes any sense. And I would say just keep it along with that. Boy, I haven't really heard of anybody wanting to break it down further with our soft skills more expensive than hard skills. I think, quite frankly, you will probably get a feel as you're talking with the individuals. You can take the temperature of the room as to how important some of these software and hard skills are and how important are the people skills. Okay, and from there come up. I feel like I'm vague, being vague and babbling there, Marnie, so feel free to jump in and talk
Well, I
coherently.
think a lot of the negotiation questions are easily answered by researching first, knowing what's competitive in the market, and then being able to fight for yourself. But sometimes I know there's some frustration expressed in the chat box that employers are still not advertising their their budgets or their wages and ranges, and that is very frustrating. And yes, that is something that we talk to them about and we encourage them to do, but that is not a requirement. So yes, it can be very frustrating when um, it's an unknown. We understand. Job search takes a lot of time. Um, there are a lot of questions on here about different resume questions, cover letters, interview questions, reference pages. So I really encourage people to go out and listen to some of our other workshops, to sign up ones for that are upcoming live. Um, but let's do one more question about what do you say when you really loved your job, but you were laid off because of lost funding?
Pretty much that. I mean, that's pretty, honestly, that's great. I would say honestly, the only thing that I've noticed, and maybe Marnie, you've noticed this as well, when I've taught advanced mock interviewing, I have actually heard somebody do an interview where they went on and on and on about how what a great job their last employer was, and oh, they had so much fun, and this was so cool, and that was so cool. Make sure that you don't overdo that, because it's going to be natural for them to wonder, okay, is this person going to be able to move on? Or is this person going to be the one who shows up in the office and say, well, at my old job, we did it this way. So there's absolutely nothing wrong with communicating an honest love of a former employer, but just make sure that they're going to want to hear about how you move forward and have an equally wonderful experience with them.
Indeed, that is true. All right, folks. Like
You got
we've
maybe
said a
time
few
for
times.
one more. Do we have time
Yes,
for one
yeah,
more? Okay. One
yeah,
more and then
sure.
we'll have to stop.
How about, is volunteering a pathway to paid employment?
It can be, absolutely. And it can be, and it doesn't always have to be a direct pathway. It can help you in a lot of ways. That's one of the things that I did during the recession when I knew it was going to be a long haul for me. In fact, ironically, I was just about ready to go to the Alexandria Career Force Center and volunteer for them right before I got my first training job after changing careers. So number one, it can give you experience in an area that you want to move into. So yes, that can be great. I would say don't go into a volunteer job with the expectation that it's going to turn into a paid position, because you may just be setting yourself up for disappointment. But volunteering, particularly in an area that is related to what you want to go into, can be a really valuable thing. Okay, I'm looking at the time. It is 11:01. Thanks, everybody. You have been terrific. This has been a terrific session. You look to be hearing from me tomorrow, and we will go from there. Thanks, everybody.